I have a question. I have a question. Hello?
Oh, yeah, I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Will these slides be available later so I can download them for my group?
I'm actually recording this.
Okay, so it'll be, so how do I access it then?
I think
Later.
they're also going to be up on the national website.
Yeah, they're up on the national website also.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Thank you very much.
Are we supposed to be hearing someone speak?
All right, I don't know if anybody can.
Can you hear him?
No,
Okay,
I
try
heard-
again. I just unmuted.
he started.
Well, I was running off of her Zoom. I'm trying to.
Okay. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, so today's topics are number one, finding somebody to onboard into your local group. And then a number of things about what it is they're going to need to know, what their duties are, the governance hierarchy that we work under, our continuum between strategy and execution, a little bit about meeting procedure. Most local groups are fairly informal about this, but sometimes it helps to have a little structure around it. And finally, some individual duties, available resources. We'll try to leave 2 minutes for Q&A at the end. So let's start with the idea of how do I find volunteers? As a board, it's important to take a look at your current set of volunteers and understand, what your succession planning process is, where folks are in terms of, I need to roll off, or maybe I need to do a different job within the organization. So it helps if you see that coming, right? The last thing you want is to be surprised when the editor says, well, I told you 6 months ago, I'm no longer going to be editor, and you haven't replaced anybody, good luck, goodbye. And that happens, right? So it helps to actually talk to the people about, where you are, and also, take an honest look about, how well they're doing their job. If your treasurer isn't sending out reimbursements, or your editor can't, get an article or a newsletter out to save their lives, maybe time to, look for somebody else to do the job, or potentially, of course, always coach them into doing the job they could do a little better. Either way works. But a couple of things to do is, a couple times a year, touch base with at least the big volunteers in your organization and ask, hey, just checking in, asking how you're doing with your role. Do you need help? Do you really think you want to do something else? Just what's happening. Or, maybe you see there's some challenges going on. I know it's been a hard year for you. You haven't had as much time to devote to being whatever officer you are. Do you want to continue? Should I look for a replacement or whatever? And then the next question is, does your group have volunteers lined up to fill key roles? Is there like some sort of apprentice pipeline going on that, if you need a new editor, are they able to be assistant editor for a while so they learn the ropes and where to send the newsletter for publication, learn the software that you use, whatever the answer is. There's some opportunities to get people genned up. So key question here is, do you have volunteers lined up to run your organization as people roll off? And I use this chart here to talk about the volunteer cycle. People start from being new and excited, and at some point they get to be fully engaged and very proficient with their jobs. And then over time, they're going to probably have less enthusiasm for the role and retire. And you're going to need folks to, step into those roles when folks retire. All volunteers go through these cycles in different phases, different times. And again, it's important to check in with them to understand where they are. As you look for folks, you've got the inner core people, the folks that do everything already. Guess what? You know, that's terrific to have hardworking volunteers. I know a lot of groups do the musical chairs thing where, you know, the editor turns into the deputy loc-sec, the deputy loc-sec becomes treasurer, the treasurer becomes, you know, and they just kind of switch around, which is fine. It helps them stay engaged in their roles, but it also doesn't give you any new blood, new ideas in the organization. So it's an opportunity sometimes to, you know, find some folks that maybe show up, might show a little bit of interest, and if you do a little arm twisting or cajoling or convincing that you know, they might be able to pick something up. You also have a, you know, group of folks that can help when asked to do a specific task. You know, that's kind of their thing. Some people like to do tasks all by themselves. We've got in Chicago a very proficient, fabulous website person, and you know, you ask her to get something done, and it's done almost before the end of the sentence has been reached. That's awesome. You know, I don't know if someday she wants to be loc-sec or not, but you know, that's something she likes to do, and she does it, and that's terrific, and everybody's happy to let her do it. So anyway, you've got, you know, different categories of folks you can pick up, but in any case, you know, look around. If you see a vacancy coming, where can you find somebody to pick that up? So let's talk a little bit now. Once you've got some people to fill the board, what are the responsibilities of the board? And this is doesn't matter whether this is Mensa or anywhere else. In essence, you've got three main things you need to do. Number one is you need to give direction. You need to give direction to the organization, preferably through some sort of formal strategic plan. There are some groups that have them, most don't. I'd encourage you to think through some of that stuff. The next thing is resources. You need to make sure you've got the necessary resources for the organization to thrive. And finally, the board provides oversight over the organization's assets. We have any technical issues?
No, there's feedback, and I was going to turn down the volume.
I think it's all the way down. But anyway, okay, I'll try to stand over here. Maybe that'll help. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the duties of the board. You need to, you have the duty of care, which means that you have to be engaged. You have to understand what's going on. You have to ask questions. You have to attend meetings, right? Because if you don't know what's going on, you cannot, you know, provide the direction that you need to provide. You can't provide the oversight that you need to provide. So make sure that you're fully engaged. The next thing is this duty of loyalty, right? And this typically is something that people worry about, conflicts of interest and things like that. So for example, you know, if I'm the printer, maybe and also the editor, maybe I ought not to be sending the print jobs to myself, just because, I mean, I may be giving the organization the best price on the planet, it just looks bad, right? So make sure that you're putting the organization interest above your own. I know on the AMC, I'm required to sign, you know, statements saying that, you know, I'm supposed to declare conflicts of interest and so forth. And in particular, I happen to have a daughter-in-law who works at Facebook. So I have had to very controversially recuse myself from discussion and votes on any motion that comes before the AMC that's got the word Facebook in it. You know, I'm happy to vote on social media issues, but if it says Facebook, I need to step back and let somebody else make the decision, because that represents a conflict of interest. You know, some people don't like that, but you know, that's my duty of loyalty. And if, you know, I'm going to be voted out of office because I've done the ethical thing, then so be it. Obedience. You need to be compliant with legal, regulatory, reporting requirements, and faithful to the organization's missions, values, and goals. This is the one that says, don't do anything illegal because that's bad, right? And it's also, you know, this is kind of a bullet point that I added. It's important to be transparent and operate in a way that is easy for others to see what actions are being performed. Now, does this mean that every member in your organization has the right to see everything? No. For example, we don't share staff performance reviews that we do with our executive directors with the membership at large, right? We don't necessarily provide the details of every contract, but we do provide audited financials to members, and we try to answer questions as best we can. We operate in a way that's transparent. Our board meetings are open to the members. Of late, we have been doing a much better job. Now we've got some technology, Zoom, GoToMeeting, etc., where folks can dial into the AMC meetings and watch them as they happen. And for a long time, we've been posting the audio and sometimes video online afterwards, so people can go back and look at it for a while. So, we try to be as transparent as we can, and I encourage you to do that as well. So, for board members, being a good board member requires focus on listening, not just expressing your opinion. We all struggle with that at some time because we're all smart. We all know what's right, but sometimes other folks can help. A homogeneous board or people who have been the same board members forever is not necessarily the best answer because diversity is going to improve your outcomes. There may be some new ideas, things you haven't tried before. Most of the local groups have been forced to, I'm not supposed to say that. Most of the local groups have been forced to operate in the virtual world now, and that has afforded a whole realm of new opportunities, right? New ideas. When I was the LOCSEC of Heart of Illinois Mensa, we hadn't had much in the way of activities. And so, I tried a whole bunch of new things that we'd never done before. I tried, what was it? I think it was a Led Zeppelin laser light show at the local planetarium. We took a trip to Fermilab in Batavia as a tour. We had a minor league baseball game outing, which, for Mensa, you thought that would just like flop totally. But oh my gosh, it was like the best thing ever. Super well attended. Nobody cared what was happening on the baseball field, but we sat there and had our Cokes and hamburgers and yelled at them. But it was terrific. Great August evening out at some minor league baseball field. And we just tried a whole bunch of different things, and what worked we did again, what didn't work we didn't do again. But it wasn't just doing the same Thursday night dinner at the Olive Garden every month and expecting people to get excited about that, right? Got to try some new stuff. As a board member, ask questions. It's okay to stand there and ask naive questions. I understand why we're doing that. And sometimes the answer is, well, I don't know, it's the way we always do it, which is not a terrifically good answer. It maybe you've always done it that way because that's what's worked. But on the other hand, what worked 20 years ago may not work as well today. So it is okay to ask naive questions, but that also means that you need to do your homework, right? Read the board minute and board agenda ahead of time if that's something you do, which you should. I'm not supposed to stand over here, am I? Sorry. This is going to be really hard for me.
Actually, I'm not sure it really matters.
Oh, okay. Stay engaged, do your homework, read your bylaws, understand what the rules are, but then, ask questions so you understand what you're voting on. Be ambassadors and examples. This one's kind of hard for, some folks, how was the board meeting today? Grumble, 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 and we could have done this and we could have done that. That's all true, right? And it's important to be transparent, but there's also, I think, a way to say, we discussed a lot of important issues, and while we didn't reach a conclusion that was perfect today, we're going to revisit it in the next board meeting, and we'll think about it some more in the meantime, and ultimately we're going to get to where we're going. It's also important to be a good example, right? Don't be the person that, takes all the meatballs.
I was there.
Oh, you were there,
Yes.
meatball game at AG a couple years ago, down in Hollywood, Florida. So be passionate about the role, right? And because that is infectious and can also help folks get excited about volunteering for the organization. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about strategy. In American Mensa, we've established a strategy with 3 key elements in it. First off is outreach. We want to go get new members. Value, we want to get the members we have to be happier about what they have. And we also want to get money from people that don't have to pay dues, right? Because we'd like to keep those at an affordable level if we can. So, you know, what is your local group strategy? I give a shout out here to Kevin Borchers of Minnesota Mensa, who spent quite a bit of time looking at their organization and creating a strategy. I think it's up on their website if you want to go visit it, mmensa.org. You know, you don't necessarily need to go to those kind of links, but at least he understands where his organization is, where he wants to take it. We also have some measurements, and this is, I think, key. If you're going to have a strategy, you have to be able to measure where it is you're going. Our goals are on outreach. This is the get new members part of it. One was brand awareness, right, and which is defined as major positive PR opportunities or media hits per year. As you know, they say there is no such thing as bad publicity, but I think that's not necessarily true. So we have decided, you know, call them positive PR opportunities. And as of September, we had 2. Our goal was 3. You can see the stats there for testing. Obviously, local group testing is pretty slow right now because a lot of places still don't have venues that allow testing, and people are reluctant because of the pandemic to get in close proximity with other testees or the proctor. So in any case, we've done pretty well on this private testing. This is the new program where people can go to Prometric facilities and take our tests at the facility. Prior evidence joins, new member joins, member reinstates, etc. At least we are able to track where we are, because these are ways that we can measure how well are we doing at outreach. And if our progress isn't what it is we'd like it to be, then the question that the board needs to sit around and ask is, well, we do better, right? Maybe your metric is how many people show up at monthly gathering. I don't know, right? So have a strategy, have some metrics to go along with the strategy, pay attention to them, and you know, adjust as required. Now, every local group has a governance hierarchy. You probably didn't know this, but there they all are in their glory. Starting with, of course, you got to follow the law, right? Then the next one down is the Mensa International Constitution, which all national Mensa organizations are bound to. Then, of course, our Articles of Incorporation and the bylaws are next down the hierarchy, followed by our ACs, actions still in effect. And for local groups, you're required to follow the minimum standard bylaws. So your bylaws may not say something that the minimum standards do. You must follow the minimum standards. We have some handbooks that have been approved. So handbooks for the editor, handbooks for the local group treasurer, etc. Then your own local group bylaws and your local group actions still in effect. So if you, as a local group, pass an action still in effect that conflicts with the minimum standard bylaws, guess what? The minimum standard bylaws wins, and you know that action still in effect that your local group passed would not be valid. So you have to kind of look at all those documents and understand them at least vaguely as to what's in them as you're trying to operate your local group. So I'll talk a little bit about this hierarchy or continuum rather of strategy. Where does your BARD operate? You know, the AMC, the American Mensa Committee, your national board of directors, tries its best to operate at the strategy and policy level. You know, the management, the day-to-day operation of the organization is done by our executive director through the staff that we pay for in now Hurst, Texas. And, you know, when we don't like what we see, we'll step in and give our opinions. But, you know, the day-to-day operation of the office, in any case, is run by Trevor Mitchell and the folks in Hurst. Now, having said that, we also have a lot of volunteers that do a lot of stuff to make this organization run. So, for example, you know, we appoint an annual gathering chair every year. We have people who run mind games. That's at the national level. Of course, down at the local level, you have editors and treasurers and stuff that kind of do the operations and activities thing. And I think a lot of times boards, particularly at the local level, are so focused down here on the operations and activities level that they don't step back sometimes and think about, you know, some of the strategy and policy and where do we want to go kinds of questions. You know, there's no right answer here. Your local groups tend to be at the you know, the lower end of the scale. The national level, we try to operate the higher end of the scale, but that's not necessarily right, wrong, or different. But just be aware of where you're operating and think about, you know, if all I ever care about is, you know, what's going on at the monthly gathering and the regional gathering when it's scheduled, hopefully in 2 years or whatever. Think about, step back, you know, what is it, where do we want to go, what do we want to be when we grow up, and do a little bit of that thinking too. All right, so for those of you in the room, I'm holding up now a copy of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. It's now we're up to the 12th edition. It is a book of 714 pages of fairly fine print. And guess what? Nobody is expected to memorize this except maybe parliamentarians who pretend that they understand everything in it. But it was written back first time in 1876 to quell conflict at a church meeting. And I see some people laughing in the audience. They must have churches where there's no arguments. So about 80% of groups use this. And I'll pass this around here if anyone wants to memorize it.
It's small print.
Yeah. There are alternative rules out there. I've been to the German annual gathering a number of times, and they use a totally different procedure where they have to like raise both hands to do a point word. It's just really bizarre, but it works fine. The purpose is to ensure meetings run smoothly and efficiently. Everybody who has a right to speak or vote can do so. And here's where the miracle happens, right? Strong personalities don't dominate. Good luck with that, right? But you know, it is helpful. And I'm also going to pass around. I'm going to give out copies of this fine document. The ABCs of Parliamentary Procedures. This is an old document.
It's a much smaller document.
And a little better than the 700 whatever pages of the Roberts book. So that'll probably tell you most of what you need to know to run an efficient meeting for local group. Oh, yeah, you got one. Typical meeting order, and you can use this for an agenda that in theory you should be passing out ahead of time for not only the board members, but the members who may wish to attend. Call to order, that includes making sure you've got a quorum. So figuring out who's there, approval of the previous meeting's minutes, if that hasn't already been done in another way. So in the AMC, we try to look at the minutes ahead of time. And if we all agree, they can be published before we have to vote on them at the next meeting. So we don't have to wait. Well, I guess our next meeting is in March. So it's another 4 months away. So it's good for us to get the minutes out early if we can. Office reports, old business, new business, and adjournment. So important stuff there. You're going to need a quorum. Usually that's a majority of your voting members of the board. Motions are made to perform some action. Everything else is out of order. So we don't have sense motions. Example, the member gets the floor from the chair, and the member says, I move to make Mensa of Georgia's preferred color peach, right? You know, if the motion requires a second, not all do, then somebody needs to second it, then you have discussion and a vote, right? Then you got all these things called subsidiary motions. So for example, someone may amend the motion and say, no, I would like the preferred color of Mensa Georgia to be chartreuse. And then you debate that amendment before you vote on the main motion. If the amendment is approved, then that becomes the main motion, and then you vote on the main motion. We had some of that going on yesterday at the AMC meeting. You can table a motion. Usually that means that you're going to not consider it right now. So for example, maybe the person who needs to speak on that particular motion had to step out to take a phone call, right? So I'm going to table the motion until they get back, and then we can discuss it. There's postponed motions, so I can postpone the motion definitely. I'm going to postpone this until the February board meeting because of whatever reason. I make a motion to postpone indefinitely. This is kind of an interesting technique that allows you to vote down a motion without voting it down, right? So you can postpone it basically forever, and you know it never comes back, and you just kind of forget about it. That allows you a way to get rid of a bad motion without necessarily having to take a stand on it, although everybody should understand that's exactly what you're doing. You can also commit or refer motions to individuals or committees, and you can also limit, extend debates. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because, again, most local groups operate on a fairly informal basis, but you know, particularly when things start to get contentious at you know, local group boards, which can happen, then it's good to have some sort of mechanism to help keep things moving. There's privilege motions. I want to take a recess. You know, the room's too hot, the room's too cold, it's too noisy. The people next door meeting the AMC are yelling at us. Whatever. You can also pick things up off the table. You can reconsider a motion. So if I have voted on the winning side of a motion, I can vote to have it reconsidered because now I learned something new that we didn't consider when we voted on the motion in the first place. So you can pick it up again and think about it. So there's some limitations on that. The other one is divide the question, right? A lot of times it's like all those in favor, aye, all those opposed, nay. I see this in the Congress every once in a while, right? So like Madam Pelosi taking a voice vote, and you know, all those in favor, all those opposed, no, and she'll go, the ayes have it, and then somebody will say, you know, I'd like to divide the question, which basically means I want, you know, a nose count of who voted for what, so we can actually figure out whether this thing passed or not. So last slide on motions, I promise. Comment should be made to the chair. This one's kind of an interesting one, but it helps reduce the back and forth conflict, you know, rather than saying, you know, sorry, you know, Ruth, you're a jerk. You say, Madam Chair, Ruth is a jerk, you know, so it tends to calm things down a little bit. This is kind of an interesting one too. No member should speak a second time on a motion until everybody has had an opportunity to speak the first time. And, ooh, this is another one. no member should speak more than twice, because that ought to be enough to get through the major points. Now, I know that, you know, sometimes in a board, you have to talk through things and listen to all sides, gain a consensus. But particularly if you have a large board like we do on the AMC, you know, we'd be here till Christmas debating some motions if everybody said everything all the time. So in general, listen to the other side, be polite and focus on the issues and not Ruth. Because she's really an awesome person.
Except when I'm a jerk.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't happen. No.
All right,
That's not what my
so
husband says.
individual responsibilities, some positions have some very specific responsibilities, such as the treasurer. The treasurer, for example, is supposed to send in reports to the national office saying, well, here's what our bank account looks like, because we have to file that as part of our forms 990 to the federal government in order to maintain our status with the IRS and be compliant with the law, right? So we need that information. So that's the job the treasurer does. There are a number of officer handbooks on the website, and it's under, I think, lead, learn, something like that. But
Those are out of date.
yeah, many are out of date. I looked at the editor handbook, I think, and it was 20 years old or something like that. But there are some revisions coming. I know the Proctor handbook has just been, or is still in the process of being updated and should get released any day real soon now. So anyway, while some of them are dated, they still have a number of important pieces of information in there. So take a look at that. If possible, you're stepping into a role, learn from your predecessor. And if your predecessor has, I don't know, died or, you know, is too angry at you because you beat him in the election or whatever, maybe somebody from one of the other 124 local groups out there is in a similar position and can help you. Most of the groups have got Mensa Connect community that you can post questions on, and I've seen that used very, very effectively. And the other resources out there are your friendly regional vice chair, or also Becky Folger at the national office.
I have a silly question here.
Yes.
My RBC, for instance, can email her at RBC5 at whatever, or email me at looks at Becky Folger. Does she have a, what happens if she, everything, I got Becky's email, that's not email Becky, but it goes to Becky, not the position that Becky holds. You know, if something happens to Becky, then
Yeah, then we're gonna have to learn. We're gonna have to learn the new name of whoever it is.
Yeah.
So what, he's saying, why doesn't she have an email
Alias.
alias? Yeah.
rather than it goes to title or her, whatever.
She may have an alias. I'll have to look at that.
We're not gonna lose Becky. Positive thinking.
She's required to be there for the next 30
Well,
years.
maybe the position, speak out Becky Folger that way. Hey, you're Becky.
Yeah. I like to say we'll jump off that bridge when we come to it. No, but that's a good good suggestion that you create some sort of alias. She may already have one. I'd have to look on the national website under contacts to see if it's actually that, or if she's got like local group coordinator or something at Ruth's looking. You know where to look?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, one of the fun parts of being on a board is that everybody knows you're wrong. I'm going to tell a story here. Once upon a time, I was working at a Fortune 500 company, and I was doing some work for the vice president. And one of the things I had to do was report back to him what the members of the employees of the company thought about one of the things he was responsible for. And there were a variety of rather pointed comments about the thing he was responsible for. And, you know, I, with a little bit of trepidation, kind of led with that, you know, and there were some pointed comments on the PowerPoint slide. And, you know, everybody around the room was kind of looking at each other and, you know, wondering if he was going to shoot the messenger. And he very nicely said, you know what, I like it when people complain. Because people who complain care. They care about what's happening. If they didn't care, they would just leave the organization and never hear about it again. So oftentimes you can hear really interesting ideas from people who are complaining. Now you have to, step back and understand it may not necessarily be personal, or even if it is personal, try to weed that out and understand what's being said so that you can learn something. So in general, I've got a list of things that members have a right to do. They have a right to not agree with you. They will have a right to want things handled in another way. They can express their displeasure about things. They have the right not to learn new information. Ooh, that's a hard one, right? They have the right to express thoughts inelegantly. Yeah, there's a euphemism for what really happens, right? They have a right to be heard. They have a right to be treated respectfully, and they have a right to be wrong. All those things members can do, and so be prepared for it. Members, however, do not have a right to threaten or cause violence. They do not have a right to an immediate response. It's often a good idea to sit on explosive emails or whatever for a day or two and think about it and craft an elegant reply. This may also give the person a little bit of an opportunity to calm down. Of course, waiting too long just probably fires them up more. So there's a happy spot there, but you have the right to step back. Maybe you need to do a little research, ask some questions before you respond. They do not have the right to unconditional capitulation. If you want it your way, you can run for the board and get elected and then vote the way you want to vote. But, I think my opinion is correct and I'm on board, so that's why I'm going to vote, right? They do not have the right to bypass rules or bylaws or laws, things like that. They don't have the right to create risk for the organization, and they don't get to avoid accountability. If, in fact, they've done something that rises to an act inimical, that's Mensa speak for doing something that is bad enough to warrant a hearing, maybe some disciplinary action up to including expulsion from the organization. That can still happen. So here's some great phrases to know and use as you're talking to folks. Thank you for reaching out to me. I appreciate your opinion. Let me look into this and I'll follow up. I need to refer you to XYZ because they're the person that is in charge of being able to handle your inquiry. May I share your concerns with others? No? That says to them, your opinion is important enough that, I want to pass it along. I'm sorry, I can't offer a solution that will satisfy you now, but I'll think about you as things evolve. Right? You haven't committed to anything, but you let them know that they're being heard. Here's some other great phrases. Gee, I'm sorry that this has happened. Or, sounds like you got an important issue. Let me refer you to anybody up in the avenues of redress that can potentially help. Ombudsman, advocate, hearings chair, whatever. I hear your concerns, but let's focus on the subject and not a personal attack on me. It's kind of a parenthetical thing. There is a pretty good book out. Again, I'm passing it around the room here called Crucial Conversations from Patterson, Grenny, McMillan, and Switzler. That is not a bad book that helps you through some of these things. The other one that I've heard recommended it's kind of in a different organizational setting, but advocates, I'm sorry, what was it? Antagonists in the church, I think it was, about, how to deal with folks that are chronic issues. But in any case, that's a thought there. So, kind of getting to the end of here, I managed to blow through an hour and a half for the slides in 45 minutes. So I'm real proud of myself here. Make volunteering rewarding. Board members want some encouragement from time to time. They want to have some fun. They want to connect with other Mensa members while volunteering. They want to have recognition, and I say they're appropriate for them. You know, not everybody appreciates being dragged up in front of a room full of 75 people and handed an award. Some people would prefer a quiet handshake or a handwritten note. But, you know, other people love standing up in front of the room and get, you know, big plaques, whatever, right? So whatever's appropriate for them, you can ask them, you know, how do you want to be recognized? In the end, you know, mainly they want somebody to say thank you. Volunteering shouldn't be vague, thankless, or a task only for the gullible. It sometimes turns out that way, but in any case, that's kind of some thoughts about onboarding board members and things you have to pay attention to. And I will now at this time ask for questions from online or in the room.
This was really helpful.
Oh,
I am
cool.
really, thank you very, very much for doing this.
Well, I appreciate you being with us online, and if everybody looks at this later, if anybody would like to get in contact with me with ideas, questions, comments, concerns, or whatever, I am at rvc4@us.mensa.org, and happy to respond to anybody that's got questions. Anything else? All right, then, hearing none, I think I will close out the session. Thanks very much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.
I suppose one question is, for those of us who didn't kind of prepare, take a look and stuff. The material here.
I think it's already up on the national website. But I have to check. Let's see. Shut down Zoom.
It's online somewhere.